Hello, everyone. What a treat to be here for what I'm told is technical webinar 11. I got some feedback today. I won't name the council, but someone from the department got in touch to say they'd been speaking to this council. They're fans of, would you believe, me and John Cooper. They like our content and come to all our webinars.
Hey.
So if you're on the call and you said that, then big thanks, big thanks. We had a mainstream webinar last week that was very well attended, but today is where we get a little bit more detailed and nerdy and get into the weeds of things. But before we get the nerds involved, let's hear from, me. I didn't mean to do it that way. Can I have Gareth? Don't start with the agenda. Let's go to the big news, Gareth. Let's go to the public beta announcement. So we've already done this on the main webinar, so the cat is firmly out of the bag, but we go into public beta on September the 24th. Is that a week today, Gareth?
It sure is, Paul.
It's almost like we've ended up.
Hey.
I don't have any involvement in this process, guys. If that was deliberate or accidental, I don't know. But in 7 days' time, we go into public beta. Never let it be said that Paul Chandler doesn't know or what day of the month it is, but here we are. Now, that's quite enough from me, I think. Let's hear from someone who actually does know what they're talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the product owner for D-TRO. It's John Cooper.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Paul. Just a shout out first for both the Q&A and the chat for this webinar. We haven't been using Q&A before. We decided to enable it for this one. So if you have an actual question you want to ask us, please put it in the Q&A. We will look at those and you'll be able to upvote on those. If you just got comments and you want to put them in the chat or have a discussion about anything, then the chat is also available. We'll do the Q&A a bit later on. But I'm here to give you mainly an update from where we are from the previous webinar. I think we mean here the previous technical webinar, which was in early June, I believe. Since then, we've done lots of great stuff on the project. One of the biggest things, obviously, has been the preparation of the version 3.5 of the service. We've already released the initial documentation for this, and then as per our advertised cadences, we are releasing 3.5 into our integration environment at the end of September, and this will then be in production at the end of October. We'll be doing a bit of a more technical update on what's actually in 3.5 a bit later, but that's just to tell you what the program for it is. And now with the launch of public beta happening, we wanted to set up a team of technical advisors to provide expert help and guidance to us as the client and the delivery team. And we are calling this the D-TRO advisory group. This first meeting of this group will be in about 3 weeks' time, and then we will meet periodically afterwards. And this will form a sort of critical and help group to help guide us along the more esoteric and technical parts of how we develop the service. We will get onto some of these things that we are going to do in this group a bit later on in the webinar. And that's it. There's explaining what all that is about. Now, just a quick reminder about how we use GitHub on the DFT public repository. We now cracked over 100 issues, and we continue to get these updated and received on a fairly regular basis. We do a daily triage, and we've now got more of a fully fledged customer service team in place. And we thank everybody who raises issues, and we do daily triage on everything that we've received and try to get back to people in a timely fashion, or post things on GitHub, or otherwise make these comments available. Customer service part of D-TRO is very important to us, and we will be rolling in lots of other improvements in coming weeks and months, which you will see as well. And we'll be fully explaining what those are. Some of the development stuff that we've been doing on the project since the last webinar and ongoing, we've got on full onboarding coming that's fit for public beta levels of signing up that we expect to happen. The private beta sign up process was in its very essence quite a manual process, and we acknowledged that needed improving. Data consumers will be able to, it's a automatic sign up process. Anybody can sign up as a data consumer. There's a bit more verification comes along if you're a publisher, for obvious reasons. We've got a gov.uk page waiting to launch as a start page to access the service. We've got all our user guide materials are transferring over to HTML pages, along with the API documentation and everything else. I think more on that later as well. We continue to do lots of user research as this shapes the way that we plan what to do, how we prioritize things. And there's some quite interesting kind of research type activity going on in the project too, as we move from the launch of public beta, still in the minimum viable product. We then anticipate adding in additional features as we go on, and we're doing quite a lot of UR, and we'll be maybe reaching out to some of you in the coming weeks and months in order to help us. That, I think, is a pretty good summary of where we got to on the technical build and customer service side. Back to you, Paul, and we'll continue.
Thanks, John Cooper. That was lovely. Now, I do believe, yes, Gareth.
Sorry, it's Menti, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, don't worry, I was going to do that anyway. I do believe that it's her first appearance on a D-TRO webinar, so go easy on her. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce Isla Kilpatrick, who is going to be talking to us about data formats and has a couple of surprises up her sleeve. Isla.
Hey everyone, thanks Paul. Yes, it is my debut. So as you said, go easy on me. I have a very quick, it should only take about 2 to 3 minutes, Mentimeter that I thought would be great if we could do live together. So let me quickly share my screen. If you could take a moment to scan the QR code, hopefully you can see that now in the bottom left of your screen, and load up Mentimeter, and then I can give you a quick overview. So as part of some of the user research that we're doing, we're looking into what are the optimal data formats that we could use for the D-TRO service. And we'd really like to understand your perspectives on, what are the data formats that you think would be optimum in relation to the D-TRO service. And as I said, we've created this short Mentimeter, which should only take a couple of minutes, and we're very keen to hear your responses. So please go ahead and scan the QR code to get started. So the first question, I can see some of you answering already. What type of organization are you? Please put in the chat if you're having any issues getting into the Mentimeter. Alternatively, you can go to if you see at the top middle of the slide, to mentimeter.com and use that code to get in. Great. The next question is, how satisfied are you with the following aspects of the D-TRO service in relation to data formats? Next question, which data formats would be suitable for your organization to use? Bearing in mind that the D-TRO service does require some specific configuration regardless of the data format. So we've got JSON, which is the current D-TRO data format, and a range of others listed below. With JSON in the lead. That's good news. And then finally, we'd love to hear some of your thoughts of how we could improve the D-TRO service when it comes to data formats. So this is an open text response. Feel free to provide your opinions, please.
Interesting seeing these come in, Isla. You're on mute, by the way, Isla, if you were speaking there.
I was, thank you. I was going to say, I'll give everyone a few more seconds to finish, and then I'll hand back to you guys in the studio.
Oh, I think that's been quite revealing, actually. Thank you, guys. Making it compatible with design software, that's an interesting one. Thank you, Isla. I don't think we said, Isla, that you're the user researcher slash service designer for the D-TRO project. Probably should have mentioned that when I introduced you, my bad. Thank you very much for that. We'll review those. Now we move on to one of the highlights for me. We're going to hear from not only Ben Pauley, who's our lead developer, but we also have with us, he's stepped out of the wedding he's at today to be with us. It's John Harrod Booth, ladies and gentlemen, to tell us about the specification. Guys, what's going on with the release schedule?
Thank you, Paul. I'm not at a wedding today, but that's fine. So I'll run you through a few slides concerning data specification update. So those of you who go onto the GitHub site will have seen this sort of table about the release schedule, and it reflects what John Cooper said earlier on. So we are in the process of releasing 3.5. Documentation is out there already, and that'll go live in integration at the end of September and in production at the end of October. The expectation is that 3.4 and 3.41 at least slated for deprecation in the spring of 2026. But I will say we're open to stakeholder feedback and comment on that as we move forward. Next slide, please. You may have seen this content already. It's reflected on GitHub. So the changes that we've made between the last version and 3.5 in general are relatively minor. So this sort of delves down into every nook and cranny of changes that have been made. One of the things that we've had to allow for is that we've had comment from both National Highways and TfL that they generate maintenance style TROs, which at the time of making actually have no specific data in terms of when particular closures may occur. They're more sort of facilitation. So the example that TfL gave to us was that they have one of these for Westminster Bridge, and they then use another mechanism via Streetworks to notify when actual closures are going to occur. And so we've provided a mechanism and guidance to be able to manage those sorts of TROs, so that the ability to provide that information at time of making is available, but also to be able to do updates later on when more specific timings are known within the context of that. We've done some additional extensions in relation to other forms of condition that might exist in terms of regulations or exemptions. We're certainly aware that there are some that relate to things relating to emissions. So Bath and North East Somerset have some of these, and some of the London boroughs do. So we've provided mechanisms to be able to qualify those sorts of conditions and exemptions. Similarly with electric vehicle charging. In both cases, we're open to looking at these with future releases. If people come back and say, actually, the mechanism we use is not included within this, then we'll aim to introduce those. Next slide, please. We have to allow for the things we haven't foreseen. We have the ability to do various extensions within the scope of the data model already. So, for example, if you define a vehicle type that we don't have in the data model already, there is a mechanism to be able to extend and specify a new vehicle type, for example. But we also have to allow for the fact that you may have a form of condition that is not covered by what we already have. We have plenty in there, and if we regularly see that people are using other things, or there's a need for other things, or stakeholders raise that, then of course we'll aim to adjust the specification as we go forward. But there is a now an additional other condition that exists in there. Hopefully it won't get heavily abused. There is a possibility of that, but it's really there to capture unusual things which you may wish to try to let us know about. Again, in response to user requests, we've extended the forms of well-known text coding as spatial coordinates that we support. So we previously supported point, line string, and polygon. We also now support multi-point, multi-line string, and multi-polygon. So I'm certainly aware that some of the DSPs have wished to supply those sorts of geometries. So we've done that extension. We've added dial-a-ride, which is a fairly obvious one, into vehicle usage type. Again, if there are other things that you see and you feel are missing from various lists, then please let us know. We will try to introduce them as soon as we can. Very minor, we've changed the data type. That's probably in the realms of the extremely detailed stuff. We've also removed support for provision of elementary street units. I know provisioning of USRNs causes some discussion. we actually inspected and saw that nobody was supplying anything to do with ESUs, which is not very surprising. So we've actually just removed that. There's no point having bits of the data model that serve no function. So we've taken that out. And then finally, where we had a user request, previously we had speed limit profiles specified by road category, and we had a request saying, could you please provide one that's not categorized? So there is now a national speed limit profile. It does imply that the data consumers have the ability to identify the classification of road that this applies to, because of course they would then have to figure out what the consequence of that is in terms of the speed limit. But it was a user request, so we've introduced that. Next slide, please. I'm going to spend a moment, those of whom were on the larger webinar will have heard this. I'll explain this again. So we've been in conversation with Ordnance Survey. Most of the local authorities use Ordnance Survey data if they have digital solutions that they're using at the moment. And in many cases, that is licensed Ordnance Survey data that's made available under the PGSA agreement. And obviously, it's DFT's intention that the data coming out of the D-TRO service is openly available. And that does cause a bit of an issue, which is if you are describing large swathes of curb lines in an urban environment, you may well be doing that by transcribing Ordnance Survey licensed data. And Ordnance Survey quite rightly raised concern that there was a possible infringement of IPR as a respect of that. So we've done a lot of work in the background, looking at a lot of different solutions and approaches, and we came up with an approach which said we will randomize spatial coordinates for geometries which are not point geometries. OS are quite happy to let us publish point geometries, but for polygons and line strings, we take each individual vertices and it's randomized. Its position is randomized between 0.5 meter and 0.75 meter. And that's done in such a way that we can reproduce that result, but it's not obvious, that randomization. So anybody trying to therefore reproduce the underlying OS data would struggle to do so. That might seem a bit convoluted, but it's got around an obvious potential IPI problem. We believe that that this is probably suitable for most use cases at the moment. There are discussions around very precise data, and we'll have to look at those as they come forward. But at the moment, for most use cases, we don't suspect it's a problem. And it's fair to say that we also, of course, have the ability for those people, entities who are licensed OS license holders to make the raw data available. And we've been in discussion with OS about how that will be facilitated, whether that's done as a OS release data set or whether DFT do it, and news will follow on that shortly. But certainly that would include the PGSA members, so the local authorities. So we are going to make the change that the external data feed going to the data consumers will have this fuzziness in it. But the examples you can see on screen show that actually, in most cases, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. It only affects the spatial data. We are not making any other change to any of the other data, just to be clear on that. Next slide, please. I'm going to hand over to Ben for this section.
Thank you very much, John. Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about the documentation restructure that John Cooper alluded to earlier on. So we've listened to a lot of feedback from users around ways that we can better organize and present our documentation to you. There's lots of different documentation formats kicking around somewhere, and we wanted to kind of bring that all in line. So what we've done is we've moved away from the more familiar Word document or PDF formats into some interactive HTML documents that are on brand with the gov.uk styling. So we have 3 core documentation sets at the moment. They are the data model user guide, which you might already be familiar with. We have the technical API documentation, which is an overhaul of some of the ICD documents that we have previously supplied. And then we have new user portal documentation. So that's for the enhanced onboarding experience that again, John Cooper was talking about earlier on in the session. And this is all made available and accessible from a common landing page. So what I'd like to do now is just share my screen and kind of show some of that off, give you a bit of a teaser about what it's going to look like. So this is the landing page that I mentioned that kind of brings everything in line and is a common entry point that you can use to access all the various different forms of documentation that we offer. There's a little bit of information here about actually registering for the service. I'll come on to that a bit later on when we talk more about the onboarding section. So I'll skip down to the documentation links below. So you might remember I said 3 core documentation sets. The links are available to those here. If we take a look at the API documentation to start with, that will link you through to a page where we have all of our technical API documentation for you to peruse at your will. So this includes a quick start guide, which is something that you guys mentioned to us before about us not really having. For those who are brand new to the service, how do you just get up and running as quick as possible? How do you start interfacing with the service, creating an account, creating apps, doing that sort of stuff? So we've got a quick start guide that walks you through that, tells you the difference between the integration and production environments, why they exist, why we need them, how you would authenticate your application. We provide code snippets as well for how you would do that from the terminal in something like curl or other programming languages, the expected response types. We have information around actually publishing to the service, so various different ways that you can do that, submitting JSON payloads in the body, submitting JSON files, submitting gzip compressed files as well. And then how do you actually get that data back out? So retrieving a D-TRO by ID or getting all D-TROs in the service. So this is the very kind of like first place you'd go to about how do I get up and running with the service. For those of you who are up and running with the service and you want a little bit more technical information, we now provide some open API docs directly from here. So if I click this link, for the developers on the call, you're probably familiar, if you've worked with APIs before, of Swagger documentation, that sort of stuff, and how this data is presented, or these documentations are presented. We provide that in this format as well. You can download it, or it's available to just view interactively. But again, this explains all the different endpoints that you might be interested in, request sample payloads, response samples, the kinds of responses you'll get back, what happens in the case of an error, and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully there's a robust set of technical documentation that explains to you how to use the API. Moving to this format also makes it easier for us to update much quicker than before. A static document could be updated, but then it would be placed somewhere that you'd need to actively go and download it again, make sure you have the most up-to-date version. So moving to this approach is really a benefit for you and for us in terms of maintaining it. We also provide a Postman collection as well. So if you're using Postman for testing, or even not for testing, if you're actually submitting orders to the service or consuming data from the service, rather than having to handcraft those or look at the API docs and work out how you translate that into a request in Postman, we provide a collection that you can just download. It's a JSON file, and then you can import it into your Postman instance, and you should get all of those endpoints of interest with pre-ready requests, bodies, and everything ready to go. All you need to do is authenticate with the service to get an access token and plug your access token in. Everything should start working. In addition, we also provide some snippets. So snippets is something we've been talking about for a little while, providing commonly requested D-TRO payloads. So we've made those available. This list is certainly going to grow. We're kind of in the infancy of bringing these in line with the into this documentation, but hopefully these things start to give you a really in-depth set of documentation on how we actually interface with the service, and I mean, you can get up and running with it much quicker and easier. So that's the API documentation. The data model user guide, I mentioned you might be familiar with this. This at the moment, or previously existed as a PDF format available on the GitHub, the public D-TRO GitHub. We've translated the whole thing to HTML. So you can navigate through this document. You've got nice cross-reference links. You can download things, etc. All the things that you kind of expect. So that's quite a nice task for us to have completed. around the data model. I won't go through all of this because it's quite a large document. If you've read it in detail, you'll understand. The last piece is around the user portal. So the enhanced onboarding experience, we've got a little bit more on this later, so I won't spoil the surprise really, but we've got documentation on what is it, why do we need it, how do I use it, how do I create an account, once I've done that, how do I log in, how do I create applications, all that sort of stuff. So there should be, hopefully, across the API docs, the data model docs and the user portal docs, a really, really nice, robust set of modern looking, easily navigable and useful documentation for you to use with the service. I think I'm handing back over to JHB now for the next section, John Harrod.
Thank you. Gareth to catch up. Okay. Two things to mention that we're looking at for the future. So the first is that we've had a number of comments and stakeholder comments about how we manage records, and both as part of that and general continuous improvement. We will look at how we do records management in the service. So we're preparing a white paper that discusses the topic, what's done at the moment, what difficulties might occur with that, and what possible alternatives are for the future. And of course, we will welcome comment and views on that. That's intended to be put to the D-TRO advisory group that John mentioned, but also we'll put it onto the GitHub site, so it'll be freely available to everybody. In very simple terms, at present, the D-TRO service manages records at a full TRO level. So the expectation is that if you make any amendments or revocations to an existing TRO that's known to the service, that you send in a full version as a replacement. And that works well in simple instances where you're doing an update to an existing TRO, which is relatively simple, but it becomes more complicated to manage in more complex situations where you might have initial TROs known to the system, and then you come along with say a consolidation order later, and it may be a bit challenging to manage that. So we're looking at that, and we're looking at alternatives. It's a possibility that we will examine shifting to the service to manage records at the provision level, so going to a more detailed level, but this clearly needs careful consideration. It would be a significant breaking change. That's one aspect, and it's likely to require a significant development effort, both for us and you. And so that needs to be done very carefully. So we're starting that process of reviewing that, and we will engage with you in due course. Next slide, please. Okay, and the next one, if you go one more slide, thank you. So we're also examining, we are in the situation where we've gone through various versions during private beta, and we can see evidence of records being submitted against those various versions. So you can see the list at the top. In principle, as a data consumer, I need to be able to consume any of those records, which is not an ideal situation. We would like to go and start to implement programs to bring the older version records up to the latest data specification version. So we've been examining that. We've been examining what is required to do that. And again, what we will do is prepare a presentation on that to go to the advisory group and also via the GitHub site. Again, we're very happy to take inputs on what we propose before any decisions are taken and before any record changes actually occur. I will stress we are taking care to ensure that we do not modify any of the semantic content of any of the records. So it's simply a case of upversioning schema numbers, and in instances where new fields have been introduced, in some cases it's obvious what the default should be. In other cases, we will fill those in with something that indicates that that information wasn't originally supplied. So we will come back with more information on that in due course as well. And at that point, I think I'm done, and I go back to Paul. You're on mute, Paul. You're on mute, Paul.
Sorry, everyone. I made the tragic mistake of trusting Gareth that he was operating the mute button there. We've all learned valuable lessons. Mistakes were made. I won't repeat the tedious things, self-aggrandizing things that I said when I was on mute. All I'll do now is pass on to Ben Pawley, who's going to tell us about all the hard work that he's done with the team around onboarding. Ben.
Thank you very much, Paul. Yes, so if you were on the technical webinar, I can't remember when it was, a couple of webinars ago, we showed off the new onboarding portal experience that we were building for users to create accounts and applications with the service. You can cast your mind back to when you were creating accounts and applications, you may have experienced it not being a particularly cohesive process. There was a number of different things that had to take place in order to actually get you an account and then an app and then get that application approved, and a number of hoops that had to be jumped through before you actually received everything you needed in order to start using your accounts. So the team have been hard at work over the last several months actually building the new portal that supports this. I'm not going to go into detail about it because we did show it off a couple of times ago, but I'm happy to announce that it is ready for use when we launch into public beta. So we will be launching it into the integration and the production environments. And that's purely because the integration and production environments are separate environments. You cannot talk across environments. So there are still two portals, but the portals themselves allow you to create publisher and consumer accounts. They allow you to create apps that then interface with the D-TRO service. One of the things that the current process or the existing process didn't really allow you to do was manage your account or applications. So once those apps were made, there wasn't a huge amount you could do with them. But the new portal allows you to kind of drill down and actually do some low-level management of those applications. You can, rotate secrets if you need to. You can reset account passwords, all the sort of stuff that you kind of expect from that sort of onboarding experience. Additionally, we have provided the ability for users to submit error reports to the service. So these are data errors that you may have come across when you're consuming data or publishing data, providing a system by which you can submit an error report to let the person who published it know that you think you may have identified an issue with their data, which they can then take a look at and rectify if necessary. Happy to say that we have worked with some of you already to get accounts created and have your existing applications migrated across. And we can continue to do that as needs be to make sure that you all have the accounts that you need, and you can see all your apps, whether they were created a long time ago or as part of the new process, you can have them all under that one platform. So I'm going to quickly share my screen again, just to show you the login screen. Again, that's accessible from this landing page. So I skipped over this section when I showed the documentation a bit earlier, but we've got some instructions on how you would actually register to use the service. So whether you're a consumer, if you're a consumer, you're probably only interested in our production data. The integration data is more of that sandbox testing environment. So we will link you straight to the production portal. If you're a publisher, we still require that process where you start off with an integration account if you're new to the service. And once you've got an app up and running and demonstrate that you can publish successfully, that's when you look to create a production account. But pleased to announce that this is no longer held behind or internally behind our infrastructure. It's actually publicly accessible, which enables you to go in, create your account. Once your account's been created, it will be approved or reviewed and then hopefully approved. And then you can log in and start that app creation management process that you kind of expect from this service. So the user guide that I mentioned, the user portal guide, talks through in detail about how you actually interface with that to create an account, etc. So all the instructions should be there for people to get cracking with using this if they need to. But yes, very happy to say several months of work I've gone into designing and building that service and making it available to you. So hopefully you should experience a much more cohesive experience around creating apps, creating applications, creating apps, and using the service. On that note, I'll hand back to you, Paul.
Thanks very much, Ben. Now we get to go over to the Q&A. There's a few questions in the chat. The first one is from a Mrs. M. Ute. It says, should Gareth be in charge of the audio for the webinars? He has the full faith of the DFT, Mrs. Ute, but we will take your feedback on board. Thank you very much. What else have we got here? We've got Josh says, and I think Josh has been hoeing this field before, a very helpful schema summary was made available as a CSV for version 3.4. Will we get one for version 3.5? John Cooper, could you speak to that?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Yeah, we got your question from the previous webinar. We are working on getting the new version of the schema summary. It's still not just a simple button push on our side, so we'll let that be sent to you. As soon as we get it, we'll also publish it so that others can see it. We are working on better ways and more automatic ways of generating that.
Thanks, John. Here's one from David. At the moment, or historically, 4 pieces of information per TRA have been required. Is that been simplified, Ben, or is that the way it still needs to be in the new world, that we need those 4 bits of info? If you need to know what those 4 bits of info are, Ben, it's in the chat.
Yeah, so 4 pieces of information per TRA is still required. So in terms of creating an account, using the new onboarding experience, all you need really is to give us the TRA ID, or you don't give us the TRA ID, you use the service to do that. So when you're creating an application to publish against, you would select the TRA ID from a pre-populated list of TRA IDs. You click the submit button and that goes off and creates your account. Behind the scenes, it creates you an app ID, it creates you an API key, and it creates you a client secret. And then the API key and secret are what you use going forwards to interface with the service. So if I need to publish a D-TRO to the service, I would make a request to the authentication endpoint with my API key and my client secret. That gives me an access token, which I then use with subsequent requests to the service to authenticate me. So there is still a little bit of kind of configuration that needs to be done. Ultimately, any requests to the service need a valid access token, and you would use your API key and secret to exchange for an access token. Hopefully, the creation of an account is more simple than before, where it involved you creating stuff and then you had to, I think, email us your app ID and your TRA ID as well. There should be less of that kind of back and forth sending emails. In fact, should be completely disappeared, and you all do it through a nice UI now. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Ben. I'm not as technical as you and David, but to me that seemed like a pretty positive answer. Good stuff. That, would you believe, is all the questions that we've got so far. You're a great audience, and I must admit I was lulled into a false sense of security by these technical webinars and wasn't quite prepared for the full force of the full webinar last week, where we got much more than 2 questions. I can assure you of that. Do feel free to check that out on the YouTube's channel if you want to have a look at that for some strange reason. Now, to finish us off, you can bet that he won't be on mute for his own bit, will he, ladies and gentlemen? It's Gareth Tilley, ladies and gentlemen. Gareth, over to you.
Thank you, Paul, for that seamless introduction. I was just going to run through the usual areas we've got for further information. Just in terms of the engagement programme, it's conference season again, isn't it, for everyone? So we'll be participating, as a team, we'll be at High Risk UK, and I'm sure a lot of you will be there too. That's at the NEC, like usual. That's on the 15th and 16th of October this year. So we'll be there and available if people want to speak to us at that conference. We'll also be presenting at the Traffic and Parking Conference. That's in Manchester on the 5th of November. John Cooper and I will be presenting on D-TRO there. And then the day after that, believe it or not, there's the TTF Autumn Conference. That's in Birmingham. That's on the 6th of November. And I'm sure, again, D-TRO will be presenting there and updating, because we're obviously a key working group within the Transport Technology Forum. In terms of comms, the main channel and the kind of really great, useful channel that we've been using for the technical side, as people know, is the issues on the GitHub page we've got, the repository we've got. As John Cooper said earlier, we've had over 100 issues raised, which is great. I'm pleased to say we've closed the vast majority as well, so we've been able to answer those queries and reflect on those queries. And there's a community as well that get people answering other comments from each other. We've got the YouTube channel as well for these technical webinars that I'm sure you're aware of. I put this up in the last webinar last week. There's been a slight change to our email address, and our website's going to be going live shortly. That's got a hyphen in it now, so it's d-tro.dft.gov.uk and dtro@dft.gov.uk for our email. The GitHub, I'm sure folk are aware of. The Transport Technology Forum provides an overview of the D-TRO service. It's got the FAQ, it's got a load of other good information, as well as YouTube lists for this technical webinar, but also the main webinars as well. I think that was it, Paul. That's just what I wanted to highlight for further information.
Thanks, Gareth, and it's great to work with a communications expert by yourself.
Well,
Would you agree that the most important thing in the area of communications is just getting the basics right?
possible.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have been a treat to present to. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed the 11th D-TRO technical webinar. Take care of yourselves, and see you same place, same channel next time we do a technical webinar. Goodbye.